I think that Shai's research connects to ours in two manners. First, Shai will speak about a period where child allowances were increased and not decreased. And if we are debating the context of the link between research and policy, when I read yesterday Shai's research, it occurred to me, well, we could perhaps speak a little bit about what is the new saving system for every child, savings, the fruit of which the children will receive when they reach age 20, instead of speaking about the alternatives for the family to get that on an ongoing basis. So what are the benefits as opposed to the disadvantages of each and every method, assuming that even the money that we are saving for the future, we can look at it as an income in the present, because we can always take a loan based on that as a collateral. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to present something in this important conference. This was done under the guidance of Professor Moshe Chazan of the Tel Aviv University, and I belong to the Bank of Israel. That research addresses child allowances, but I'd like for you to look at it from a wider viewpoint of welfare policy for reducing poverty, and I think that in that respect that very much connects to the session on negative income tax, or any ATAC, because the policy recommendations at the end is not necessarily to reinstate the child allowances to their original level, but rather to improve the welfare policy as a whole. So let's start with the story that enabled me to carry out this research. Until 1993, children allowances in Israel were of two kinds. Universal child allowance as per the number of children, and allowances for families of those who had done army service. In 1993, a decision was made to abolish this distinction, and so they adopted the universal child allowances, and they canceled the condition of people having done their army service, and so that also includes yeshiva. Well, yeshiva students will also receive the same allowances as those who had done their army services. So canceling this condition brought in mostly Arab families into the circle of people eligible for the child allowances, which had been given until then only to those who had done their army service and to ultra-Orthodox who were studying in yeshivot. So researchers do need some sort of a change in order to be able to check the impact, and this is what I've taken advantage of. So in 1993, they decided to increase or to apply child allowances to Arab families as well, and this was done gradually between the years 94 to 97. Research in Israel to date on the impact of child allowances concentrated mainly on the impact on fertility. There's no research which addressed the impact on poverty or poverty implications, and this is what I will try to do here. So the economic research in the world agrees as a rule that financial restrictions or poverty might impede on the acquisition of education for children in poor families, but this applies mostly to poor countries, developing countries, and there is a divergence of opinion in literature whether this applies to rich countries as well, because one might claim that in terms of absolute income, perhaps there's no problem in Israel, there's no absolute poverty that would prevent children from going to study in high school as is the case in Africa, for instance. And my research addresses a country like Israel, which is a relatively developed country, but with a very high rate of inequality, and that is why Israel is an interesting case to study in this regard. Which is what appears in the last bullet, and especially in a country like Israel then. So in a few words, if you get lost later, what does this address? Well, the question is, what was the impact of an increase in the allowances in Arab families, both on education and employment and other avenues for Arab boys and girls? Once again, I'm taking advantage of the change in policy, the difference of differences, and I compare the impact on education or on scholarity in families of 4 children and up to learning in families with 3 children where the change was not relevant to them at all. So there is a certain evolution in type A families as opposed to type B families, and I will use that to study the impact of the increase in child allowances, mostly on scholarity, on education. And so the conclusion would be that increasing allowances for Arab families has increased learning and scholarity among girls. Why? Well, we'll talk about it. Even though you got the results, stay with me and I will explain in greater detail. So let's see what happened. Until 1993, the child allowances as per number of children were stable. This is the allowance for Arab families as a % of their income. And this applies, by the way, almost completely. There are some Bedouins who did do their army service and were receiving it before, but this does apply to the majority of the Arab population. And in 1993, following the change in policy decided upon in 93, the child allowances have gone up, but they've gone up only for families with 4 children and up. I could continue this. You would have seen it for children with 6 and 7 children, but families with 4 and 5 children enjoyed or benefited of quite a sizable increase as compared to families with 3 children. We can see what happened to families with 2 children. Almost nothing happened there. So I can compare what happened over time between the various groups. Let's see what happened. What you can see here on the vertical axis, this is the % of scholarity of children in families with a number of children cited here, 3, 4, and 5. When I say 3, 4, and 5 children, that's 3, 4, 5 children aged 0 to 17, 18, which is the age which makes one eligible for child allowance. Beyond that, some of the children have already left the home, but they are already beyond 18, and hence the family is not entitled to an allowance for them. So up to the change in 1994, as you can see, the scholarity rate in families with 5 children and 4 children were lower than that of families with 3 children. And that, there's a good chance that this is connected to the situation at home. If you have to provide for a larger family, the mission resting on the parents, responsibility resting on the parents is more difficult. There's sometimes girls helping the parents in the home, helping with the younger children to allow the parents to work. So you can see 5, 4, and 3 children where the learning % was the highest. And when in 1994 they started raising gradually the child allowance, look what happened between 1993 and 1997. The gap was closed. And it remained closed, hence. So the question which some of you might bring up is why the closing of the gap, does it come from a decrease in the scholarity rate in families of 3 children as opposed to an increase in families with more children who received more money in allowances? So this is exactly the importance of this system of the difference of differences, which relates to what happened in the economy in general terms. And what happened is that the unemployment went down between 1993 to 1995. It's just at a time where the scholarity rates of families with 3 children went down. In other words, the demand for workers increased, so the opportunities for children in high school age, the temptation to work was great. And furthermore, unemployment went down because of a surge in the a boom, rather, in the construction industry. Which you can see in red and in blue, the employment of Arab youngsters in the construction industry. As you can see, it's almost identical, with the exception of the peak in 1991. But generally speaking, with the surge or the boom in the construction industry, there is an increase in the employment of Arab youngsters. That's what happened in the families of 3 children, which were not eligible for the child allowances, so the temptation to go to work was much bigger, as opposed to families with more children where the scholarity continued, and that's how the gap was closed. With girls, that story of decrease in scholarity is much less significant. The decrease with girls in families with 3 children, because girls work less in construction, work less in general. And so with the girls, you can see an increase in scholarity, where in parallel, the scholarity in the smaller families did not change. So this is even without going into the regressions. This can really show very efficiently the results of our research. So even before the regressions, what I'd like to show you is the balancing checks, just to show you that my data is valid, that the groups that I compare are more or less similar. In the first 3 lines, one can see the rate of scholarity with the result changing, the rate of employment of these boys and girls, and the rate of boys and girls who are idle, who are not working. They do not study, they do not work, maybe they help at home, keeping their younger siblings, watching over their younger siblings. So as you can see, the change in scholarity, as we could see before, the scholarity in children with families with 3 children was 70.8 before the change, 79.8 as compared to 70 and 73 in the larger families. Employment was higher with boys in larger families, the employment rate, and also the number of boys and girls who were idle. As for the characteristics of the household that children come from, one can say, generally speaking, that the scholarity of the parents resembles that of the parents in the other families. Look at the scholarity of or schooling of the fathers, the parents. In families with 3 children, the average was 7.2 school years, then 7.5 and 7.3. So no significant differences. But more important than that, what we can see in the lower panel is the final birth rate, or the TFR of mothers from the various families with 3, 4, and 5 children. At this point in time of 1995, I checked what was the TRF, what was the number of children that mother brought, if there were 3 children in working age, 4 or teenagers, TFR, or older. So in the families that bring the same amount of children, 6.5, 6.6, 6.7, no significant differences. And what does that mean? That we are not talking about different families that bring more children or less children. Simply, it is a question of the timing where the change of policy has caught that particular family. So perhaps some of the children are beyond 18 years of age and are not eligible, no longer eligible. But these are families with the same TFR, and their income is very similar as well. So that is why this comparison is definitely valid, and one might draw conclusions on it. Formally speaking, there is a regression equation here of the difference of differences, which provides a dummy variable for families with 4 children all along the period, a dummy for the period after the change for all the families, and an interaction onto the two, between the two dummy variables, which is what I find interesting in the regression, because that answers the question, what was the change? What was the change between the various families, between the different periods? That is the significance of this interaction. Now let's see some regressions. This is a regression which compares families with 4 children age 0 to 18 to families with 3 such children. On the left, we have the totality of the boys. As you can see, in such a type of regression for all the boys, the impact is significant, not very significant. The p-value of 10%. And when one looks at the two central columns, girls only, as you can see, once you check other variables as well, the impact is very significant with girls, as for the boys, it is not so significant in the two right-hand columns. That's when you compare families with 3 children to families with 4 children. When you add families with 5 children, where the increase in the allowance was much more significant, then the impact is more significant as well. When I look at the totality of the boys and girls, you can see the impact of 0.9% in the schooling after the change. And again, with the girls, the impact is much more significant, 0.15. But as for the boys, it is not significant, statistically speaking. Here I look at the impact on employment rates, because it's possible that there was a passage from employment to learning, to schooling. Was that really the avenue? As you can see, with girls, where we saw a significant positive effect on schooling, the effect on employment is negative. That is, there was a decrease in employment. But a minus 0.03 is smaller than the impact on schooling. So something else happened beyond the impact on the decrease in employment, which led to passing or to opting for schooling. There was a bigger group of girls who went to schooling, but not from employment. I tried to research that additional element or factor. And a possible avenue which was of interest was whether these girls assist at home, watching over their younger siblings, to assist in the parents' employment. So I divided it into the sample of the girls. On the right-hand side, it's all the girls, as you could see before. And on the right-hand side, I divide us into 2 columns, the group where there are siblings under 9, and a group where there are no children under 9 years of age, thinking that the girls are required to assist more in a home with younger children. And I did find that all of the impact, a dramatic impact, was exactly in that group of families with young children. Girls in families with young children below 9 years of age, there was a dramatic increase in schooling because of this change in policy. I also carried out all sorts of checks in order to increase the inner validity of the findings. They are indifferent to the number of years that you put in the sample. And I carried out 2 placebo-type tests or checks like we do in medicine, when you give someone a placebo, which has it's not supposed to have any impact, just to check the psychological effect. And here too, I gave some evaluation, and I checked what happens in the comparison of families with 3 children to families with 2 children. And nothing happened, and I was not supposed to find any finding. And I didn't find anything significant. And so the impact that I found is real. And another type of check is what happens if I move the entire sample 8 years backwards. In other words, instead of having the change between 94 to 97, I check as if the change happened between 90 and 93. And here too, I'm not supposed to find anything. And indeed, I do not find anything. So this goes back into showing that the impact that I found is indeed valid and have not missed something of significance. Another check which I carried out was for children in families where the mothers are above 43 years of age. And that check is important because the allowance, as you know, can also increase fertility. If the allowance increases childbearing, then there is a passing between the groups which might impair my results. So families, children who were in families with 3 children, due to the change, have become children in families with 4 children because another child was born, and that might have an impact on the various groups. So to neutralize that, I checked what happens in families with mothers above 43, where it is already difficult to bring another child, and I found indeed a significant impact, perhaps even stronger, on the girls. And also when we look at the group as a whole, the result is significant, but it is not that significant with boys. So the results are very uniform, no matter how you check it. And now the question can be asked, why girls yes and boys no? Why on girls the impact is statistically significant and not in the case of the boys? Well, in my opinion, this is a cost-benefit issue. In terms of the cost, going over from employment to learning or helping at home to going to schooling, and note the difference between boys and girls in this respect. The contribution of boys to the household income is much bigger than that of the girls. In those families, I'm talking about the middle 90s, where it was even more significant, and 11% of the boys worked at that time and contributed 30% of the income of their household, whereas for girls, the few who worked, it was 3%, sorry, in 95, and I claim that it went down following the increase in the child allowances. They contributed less than 20%. So the renunciation here was less difficult than that with boys, where the contribution was higher. In terms of benefit, the return of education for Arab men in 1995 was 4% as compared to 10% for girls. And I'm not talking about exogenous, endogenous, a simple regression which calculates the return on education. So what I found is 4% for boys and 10% for girls. So this is more or less the average in the general population in the world. So the benefit also in going from work to education was lower for boys. Now, they did not do the same regressions as I did, but they can see what happens in their environment. They can see what is the difference between those who did go to school and those who didn't. So, and that did not provide a very strong incentive to switch from working to studying. So I'm going to sum up. As we could see, the increase in child allowances, as I've said in the beginning, to Arab families has increased the schooling rates for girls and reduced some, to some degree, employment among them. But this was not the main avenue of the impact of the increase in child allowances. The main impact was in the capability of girls who had assisted in the household with the younger siblings to be able to go to school. More money came into the family. The parents could work a little less perhaps and allow the girls to go to school. So this is the main avenue I'm talking about. And now I'd like to caution us from drawing conclusions, far-reaching conclusions about the efficiency of child allowances in the long run. They might have an impact on the number of people to be provided for, and a negative incentive or a disincentive for the employment of the parents. I check the size of the families, and the disincentive in the employment of the parents. I don't go into this in this research, so please do not draw any far-reaching conclusions about child allowances. But one thing, and here I connect to the previous research presented, a negative income tax can prove efficient, and the main idea of negative income tax was to allow people to come off poverty and not necessarily to push them towards work. And if anyone who knows if I'm wrong, the decrease in, or the cut in child allowances, which was much more dramatic in its cost as compared to a negative income tax. I think that we were accustomed to become modest in our demands and expectations from the welfare policy and how much we should spend on it. So the demands and expectations in the previous presentation were very modest, to add 600 million shekels, or in the Knesset Committee on Poverty, 1 billion shekels. Even if they add those amounts, that will not reach to the cost of the dramatic cut in child allowances. And if we are seeking something that will enable those families to come out of the poverty trap, because those children who don't go to school will end up being poor themselves, and their children will not go to school, etc., like a vicious circle. And hence, I think that negative income tax and a generous one can do very good things. Thank you very much.
לעשות דברים טובים. תודה רבה.
יש לנו כמה
several minutes for questions. Here, okay, hello. I wanted to ask about the population, the study group, the population of the study. You did not define them so well. If I continue the mini discussion we had before, there's a big difference between Christians and Muslims, and there is a difference in culture between rural and urban populations. And one of the pieces of data that occurred to me was that the level of education, the average level of education of parents was 7 years. That is very low to me. So my question is, did you think or measure a variable such as the impact on the speed, time that the parents send their children to work instead of study? I did not like the fact that you took data from 20 years ago. Arab society has changed dramatically in the meantime. This is a whole generation. I don't know whether this is relevant anymore. There's another trend. It has nothing to do with the fact that whether or not you get 300 or 400 shekels of child allowance. There are trends in society. For example, girls study more and work more. I don't understand what is the relevance to today's situation. In addition, regarding the Christians among the Arab population, I think it is 2%. I don't know whether or not this is relevant. So, first of all, I did not note that it included only Muslims. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that. Something else that I forgot to mention was that I checked what happened if I looked at the whole population or just Arabs with 12 years of schooling and below. So in fact, this is what I did, 12 years and below only. And so this is why the average looked low to you, 7 years. And indeed, that could answer the other question, when you look at or more educated people, the data looks positive, but it is not significantly different. So in fact, we are talking about focusing on lower socioeconomic levels. The difference between the 90s and today is not that dramatic compared with studies that look 50 and 60 and 100 years back and try to learn something from economic history. Just a second. This was one point. The second point is that there was no way to do an economic study if we'd avoided checking historical data, because this is the way things work. Things have happened in the past. You can check the past and learn about the future. If somebody has a way of explaining how to do studies on the future in another method, I'd be very happy to hear about it. And another point, in a study, I looked at processes and trends with in-depth analysis, and made comparisons between two groups that are very close to each other, and nevertheless, I neutralized the joint trends between them. So even though things happened over the years, this is exactly what the study is looking at. Otherwise, I would not have had to work so hard. I would just have taken descriptive statistics and showed it. But we know this is problematic, so I made an effort. Any additional questions? I would like to ask whether your findings do not refute some of the basic premises of the previous session. One of them is the culture of not going to work among Muslim women. I think there's a certain problem here. I think it may be more complex and not just a matter of not going to work, but of sleeping outside the home or getting away from home. And then one of the solutions is public transportation and not anything else. And this brings me also to think that perhaps ITAC is not the solution, but investing in public transportation infrastructures could be more effective in getting Arab women to work or into the labor market. Not just transportation, but the public transportation is one of the most important, because perhaps your findings show that there is no culture of not going to work.
Thank you for your presentation. I would be interested in your opinion concerning the recent rise of child allowances and the implementation of child saving accounts in Israel as a new trend of social policy. Thank you.
Don't you think that your research starting point should have been a distinction between boys and girls, because it's possible this bias created a bias? Yes, there was a distinction between girls and boys. Or maybe I didn't understand your question. It was said, for example, that among families with 3 children, 75% participated in schooling. But how many of them were boys and how many of them were girls? There is another slide that shows it among girls. This was among boys, and we can look at the slide among girls later, if we have time. Regarding the question whether these findings disrupt the premises of the previous talk, I didn't understand your question really. This study examined the impact of child allowances on schooling, not on employment of those girls. And we know that there's a puzzle sometimes that we have to work on, that even though there was significant rise in the education of Arab women, the rise in employment rates was very small. very moderate, and perhaps this is because of culture. I agree completely with the claim that investing in transportation infrastructure and other utilities could allow the employment of Arab women in a way that would be more compatible with their culture. It is not, it's not connected with the study. It is my personal opinion, and I agree with you completely. Regarding savings for every child, no, there was a question here about that too. Regarding savings for every child, that was a question, right? I'm very happy that you asked this question. And what Leah mentioned in the beginning, in fact, the study shows that if you give the parents money, cash money, without any conditions and not as a coupon and not at the age of 18, they know what to do with it. There are many studies that were done around the world. They show that the money does not go to cigars or pink champagne. So I think that savings for every child misses a little the purpose, because it gives the money at a stage in life where it is a little too late. And I'm glad for this question, which means that we can compare the benefit of early childhood education, for example, and the benefit that the child has at the age of 20 when he can work and acquire higher education. We know that early childhood education has a tremendous benefit even for the person's development at the age of 20. Of course, this is true that there is a better return, but lack of education at the early childhood could create a limitation to acquiring education at a later age, and then the cost of acquiring education becomes astronomical or impossible. And this is the importance of early childhood. I thought, for example, why this was so alluring for policymakers, this plan. And I said, okay, at the age of 20, there is some savings, it can help children, but the motivation was not to give the kids 20,000 shekels at 20, but because they didn't want to give 50 shekels per child on an ongoing basis throughout their lives. Because this is the impact, it has to do with the impact of giving income as a negative incentive to work. So they said, okay, if we give them money, the parents will not go to work. But economically speaking, if the market is open to, a banking market is open to these people and they can take loans, it will be less effective on the labor market. So the basis of policy is not economic. It is something else. And we can look at the publicity that is done for these plans, programs. Are we done? Thank you very much.